Go. And we are going to be looking at adjusting to the new normal, the next generation technology to build resilience within the construction industry. We have fostering business resilience through technology and digital transformation and thriving in a new normal. And we have with us Aaron Belbasis. Aaron leads digital technology strategy at Aurecon's future technology as Aurecon's future technology leader. And his cross-discipline experience focuses on navigating the strategic use of emergent technologies and techniques and the innovative integration of leading research and development to improve organizational positioning and success in turbulent environments. Fantastic. And we have Jeremy Harkins here as well. Hi, Jeremy. And Jeremy is founding director of ineni. I hope I've got that right. I should know that one. Ineni Realtime, innovative building technology company, and an academic focused on the development of the real-time visualization industry. He delivers keynote presentations and it's the leading edge of real-time virtual technologies and has spoken internationally about VR and AR. So, guys, I'm going to hand it over to you. It's not a keynote. It's not a tag team. It's not no gentle sparring, but I think a fireside chat to take us up to close at 3 o'clock. And ask you to keep an eye on the QR button tab at the bottom there. So if anyone's got any questions they'd like to throw at you, we'll take it away. But Jeremy and Aaron, over to you.
Thanks, Timothy.
Hey. Thanks, Tim. And thanks for having us. Very good to be here. Some really interesting presentations today. So, Aaron, how you doing?
Hey. And now, for the benefit of the audience, Jeremy and I managed to grab a bit of time yesterday and start to look at what we could talk about today to sort of help, I think, bring together a bit of a close to the topics that were discussed throughout today. We've gone from everywhere from the need for digital transformation through to UAVs, robotics, prefab, digital twins. And a lot of this has all centered around a need for a rapid digital transformation over the last 2 years. I think whether you would say that it's a black swan event or not, COVID-19 has really kind of disrupted the way that we do things around the world, particularly now for us in the construction industry. So if you have some questions or you want to better understand any of the technologies that were mentioned today, or you just wanted to look at how we would give a response to a particular technology or theme, by all means, send through the questions and Jeremy and I will do our best to touch on them. Maybe we'll start off, Jeremy. I'll throw a question over to you. Digital twins. Okay. It's been a lot spoken about. A hyped up technology, a hyped up theme. Is it something we've had for decades? Is it something brand new? What's your take on digital twins, I guess, this year in 2021, knowing that you've spent many years on these?
Thanks, Aaron. That's actually not a bad start because those that have seen me present before and know in any real time know that we've been, I guess, doing digital twins for a long time, since before we called them digital twins. So me personally, I started about 25 years ago doing digital twins, or the kind of the early versions of what they have now become. And where I've got to now is, and it's part of the reason I asked those questions about essentially where does the data stop and are we selling designer data, is that what I've come to, and I'm now producing some of the most, I guess, data-rich digital twins in the world, terabytes, gigabytes of data generated in real time over tiny bandwidth. I have to delete data. And this is essentially what I've come down to. And so I've come down to a point where at the very end of all of these digital twins, as we add IoT, sensors, systems, and so forth, I can take a $20,000 shack and make a $50 million digital twin. And I can keep adding data to it. The reality comes down to how is a space used and what's the function? And it's only when we actually understand that really simple concept that we can delete all of the data related to the digital twin, which is pretty much, I suspect, about 99% of the data, and actually have a very lightweight model, which is used to interact between physical activity and digital space. And that's actually the reality of a digital twin. It's something that we haven't really bridged the gap of yet. If you look at some of our early work in digital twinning, you'll understand kind of the visual need for this. It's all about getting your granny to understand it. Can your granny control the air conditioner in a multi-million-dollar mixed-use development? If not, your digital twin isn't good enough. And it's kind of that simple. So that's my take on digital twins. I'll let you respond because I've got a question for you too. So if you'd like, you can have a response to that.
Look, I think digital twins are something that, digital twins really speak to how readily accessible our data is. You know, the slogan everyone likes to throw around right now is that, data is the new oil. But like oil, if you're going to use that example, crude oil comes out of the ground, it needs heavy amounts of refinery and processing to finally get to the valuable sort of jet A1 jet fuel that you need to actually use it. A barrel of oil is not necessarily, it's a chaotic mess of sort of different chemicals. So what it really speaks to is a lot of organizations are sitting on these oil fields of their own data, client data, or just readily accessible open sort of access data sets. The digital twin really sits as that system that allows you to bring it together and access the data. But behind any digital twin, particularly when we're looking at the nature of our construction industry, going right from concept, design, engineering through to build, we're looking at the central digital thread that weaves through it. And Simon talked about something similar earlier today in the opening keynote. It's the digital thread that brings together all the different disparate data sets into that ability for us to now understand it. And that's what you're referring to, Jeremy, when you say, if a granny can understand it, if someone can access the data now, they don't need a degree in engineering or years of construction experience, but they can access that particular piece of information at their fingertips. That's what we need to be striving for, but also understanding what the relevance of each of that data set is.
And I think that's exactly the point I was trying to make. So, and I'll maybe shift it a little bit because digital twins, I think are kind of this goal that we're all aiming towards, that the industry is kind of, well, at least a lot of the industry that I'm kind of interacting with at the moment. It's a bit of the golden duck, we're going to get there. When? I'm not sure, because BIM has been the next big thing for 30 years. And and I kind of have a lot of questions about that. But putting that aside, because one thing that we're really supposed to be talking about here is business resilience. And so what I guess my question to you is, so one thing that kind of came up is as Aurecon, what do you see? So what do you see how does technology really help your business resilience going forward as a large organization?
Thanks. Okay, so technology effectively is a tool. If I've got a toolbox that's full of technology, it's less about the technology or the tool itself. It's what you're looking at as the outcome. An interesting thing is that a lot of people focus on the specific tool, the specific technology, and it ends up captivating your attention, and you sort of pursue it down the road of, okay, I have a technology now, what do I use it for? Went and bought a brand new hammer, but if I needed a spanner, I got the wrong tool. And so a lot of what we've been doing at Aurecon is actually looking at it from reverse. This is, what is the end outcome that we want to achieve? For a lot of organizations that we're working with and with ourselves, like if we do use, look, the rapid digital transformation that we've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to actually build up resilience has seen everyone kind of basically shift off legacy really quickly. You can't go to site anymore because you're not allowed. You can't use paper anymore because there's no point in writing something down and then having to mail it and wait 2 weeks till it gets to the next engineer. We had to move off legacy systems straight into digital. Fortunately for us, there'd been that sort of lack of market uptake. Yes, the industry might be moving slow, but the technology readiness was there. So we were able to escalate our market readiness and our market uptake to available technologies, which really helped us a whole lot. But what we've seen over time now is there's really 3 distinct groups of sort of efforts towards resilience. There's the organizations that really picked up the pace and maintained pace right through digital transformation, right over the last 2 years, and are really just sort of trying to lead the pack. There's a middle pack who have actually they're starting to say, when is enough? When can I stop and take a break? I can't keep on burning resources through this pandemic or through this need for rapid digital transformation, I need to sort of scale this appropriately. And lastly, there's the group that sort of did the bare minimum. And really, they're likely going to regress back to their old ways as soon as they can all get back into an office. They can all say, okay, whew, pandemic's done, that's never going to happen again. Now, one thing we know is we shouldn't probably have that mindset. And they're those laggards that are going to shift back into the old mindset are probably going to find themselves in a lot of trouble, a couple of weeks, years, months, who knows, down the track. The ones that really powered ahead and were pushing at an amazing burn rate on new leading technologies, we want to kind of question what's the motivation. Once the pandemic kind of winds down, we're all sort of getting back out there, construction is starting to pick up again. What's the motivation that allows them to keep on burning the resources? And then it really takes you where we're going to probably see the vast majority is the groups of companies who actually kind of stopped and took a breath and said, okay, the stick of the pandemic's no longer there, but the carrot's probably not incentivizing enough to continue some of this change. We're going to see this separation here where some will regress away from some of the technologies we've done, like video conferencing and all this. There's very apparent economic benefits. I don't need to get on a plane and fly to Sydney to have a conversation with Jeremy. I can do it face to face digitally. But when other ones that are a little bit more obscure, things that we've invested in that might not need to be there, data capture technologies that we probably say, oh, we can just go over the site and do it. And we're going to move away from them, but it's really going to start to move away from this real mindset of building resilience. Where, yes, okay, economically, it might be the wise decision, but we're in a good position now by actually shedding a lot of the legacy, because what's been holding a lot of organizations back is we can't change one piece on the board without everyone that we work with moving with us. So we can't deliver 3D models as the only form of delivery. We still have to deliver 2D PDFs because someone down the track still needs 2D PDFs, the client, contractor, stuff like that. It'd be amazing if we can just say, here's your digital twin. It contains all the information. It's all in there, all the engineering specs. Everything you need is contained.
But isn't that exactly, just can I just interrupt quickly? Just one thing about that. Because isn't that exactly why we still have 50% of the industry using essentially AutoCAD? Because at some level, we only need PDFs for a good portion of what we do. So for someone making their jobs, they're going, well, I'm never going to use Revit.
And that probably speaks to more the fact that, one, we've got a skill deficit that we need to actually lift as well at the same time. We can't just adopt new technologies. We have to look to our people and actually upgrade the skills as well. The second one is, and this is one that's been touched on today and frequently throughout the conversations, is that the value chain, the end-to-end delivery of an asset, whether that's a building, a bridge, a road, a park bench, it's very siloed. It's very pigeonholed for each particular player or custodian along the way.
Yep.
As someone who makes digital twins, I'm sure you're aware. Upstream,
just a bit of here,
need someone to pay for a digital twin. So who pays for a digital twin becomes...
Well, see, that's interesting because I know, and that's actually the problem. No one does. And after 10 years of running a business doing these, I've actually realized no one pays for it. In fact, it's a hard thing. So how did I survive as a business, considering that no one has ever paid me to make a digital twin? And it actually, this aligns with resilience. And it aligns with essentially how big businesses and small businesses are operating at the moment. Because that's what, and it's a really interesting thing, because I see two different strains or streams of resilience. It's kind of like you said, there's these three groups, but those three groups are actually all shifted to one side at the moment, in my opinion. And I'm seeing a lot of small businesses fail. And when I look at technology, having done it now for 25 years, the cost of it is huge and it's never ending. So as I apply technology, I almost need more technology to kind of make the previous technology valuable. Otherwise, at what point do I stop using the technology to just have a thing? And in the end, and this is the sad thing about it, is buildings actually just are a thing and can sit there for 1,000 years as a brick. So how much technology do we need beyond material technology? And being a digital twin creator, it's kind of, like I said, spat me out this other end, and has led me to this point of what am I? What is my value, and how did I? So where did I make my value as a business? And it's actually not in the data. It's never in the data. So I've got digital twins that are 400 versions of them across 10 years, and that altogether probably a few terabytes of information. And the majority of it will never, ever be looked at again, at least not by a human. Maybe by an AI when it's doing big data looking, but probably not, because most of it's not integrated, because it was done in a system previously to a non-proprietary system, which is now being used. As we said, we kind of need to standardize our information. But every time I do something as a designer, I add a new system, a new way, a new piece of information. And so all I see is a never-ending stream of data. So what I made money on as a business, or how I survived, was actually all of the interactions, the human interactions around the data. And what I found is the more data I delete, the less data I have, the more clear the human interaction is. And I'll give you a really good example of it. So the initial digital twin we built for Virtual Brain Guru, and it was the whole thing. I did the entire development, every floor, every building. There were supposed to be 16 systems. Only 3 systems actually made it into the virtual model. I did that whole thing for $150,000. For another $100,000, I could have had all 17 systems integrated. That problem, which was a $100,000 problem 8 years ago, is now about a $5 million integration problem, because of the increased data and because of the increased in human activity in the space in that intervening time. And no one's ever actually integrated it. So what I actually made money from...
Is it then an issue with servicing the digital twin, or the nature of the data? The data is inevitably...
That becomes... It does that, because every human interaction, so now, for instance, I can now go access who accessed a particular door for the last 8 years historically across time. And I can do that for every 19,000 people in a building. And so that data is growing constantly. And it's never ending. Now, we're reaping it. So we kind of put a lot of it into archive and we get rid of it, but it's still sitting there. I can still go access it. Funnily enough, I can go all the way back to a previous model that doesn't even exist and find data for a fake person going through a door that no longer even was in the design spec. So there becomes this divergent nature of digital twins. The only thing I've made money from is essentially people using the model, finding the toilet, essentially. So after all this time, this digital twin, which is still linked up to these systems, but is a growing data problem, is being used by people for fire evacuation videos. So I'm 35 contracts or 40 contracts in now to this thing. And most of the development, and it's the most beautiful digital twin in the world, I guarantee you, no one has in 10 years made anything as pervasive, as interactive, as photoreal. Even 10 years later with more photoreal technology, this one still stands alone. And it cost a tiny portion of what we're saying digital twins cost now. But no one uses it, except the person, say a cleaner, on his first day of work when he looks at the new fire evacuation video. So down the line, 10 years later, I've had a few 100,000 people watch little snippets of pieces of information, all drawn from a digital twin. None of the data is actually relevant. It's only ever the human interaction and the transfer of knowledge to that person. So instead of getting a sheet of paper which says, gather on the north lawn, and he doesn't know where north is, he now has a visual understanding of how to get from his desk to the north lawn. And that is the real value of a digital twin.
So is the challenge that we're lacking in complete understanding how to take value out of a digital twin and how to actually implement something for impact. Because if you've got less and less people using these twins, less and less eyeballs on it, they're going to just be cast aside. It's another form of technology we're just going to look at, and it's hit its hype circle and we're going to get rid of it.
That's right.
So I guess...
But that's not true, because I have a 10-year digital twin, which is now linked invariably to the history of the building. So at some point in the future, a historian can now go back and actually generate real value from this digital twin, because they can say, what happened at Brain Guru? What made it a good place? And that is
So
actually
then if the only person, I think the challenge there is if the person deriving value from your digital twin is 1,000 years from the day of creation, why would we bother now?
because I'm still here as a business. So somehow I managed to reap just enough value from the digital twin across, and mostly it's been deleting data. So I get BIM, I get a billion different files, I get a billion different formats. Every system I've done mining, every system that you can pretty much imagine, every software you can imagine, I've pretty much touched at some point. And what I've done with most of it is reduced it to a couple of lines and a few numbers. I just delete it all. Like I don't delete it. I leave it there. I make sure it's linked. But I can now track back and see that no one has ever touched it for 10 years. So is it relevant? The only thing that's relevant is the update of the new information so someone can find where the toilet is when they put hoarding in to do a renovation. That's it. And we never actually solve that problem at the moment.
I think the challenge with that then comes to what happens at the end of the life of an asset. An asset might be 100 years old, and I want to know, or 50 years old, and it's going through a half life or a third of its life, to 2/3 of its life, refit or renovation. Let me get that one up. There we go. The time scale at which relevancy is important actually varies depending on the asset. Something might not have changed for 10 years, but that's perfectly fine. Versus something else that might have, in 10 years, if you haven't changed your computer systems, you're probably in trouble. 10 years, you haven't changed your piping, well, that's probably okay. So I think it's important that we understand that there's actually a broad timescale, and we actually look at the life of the assets we're working on, whether it's a building, a road, a tunnel. It becomes something that we need to understand that it's not just, and this is us stepping out of that, we just do architecture, or we just do engineering, or we just do the construction stage, or we just manage the asset, or we just tear it down and remediate the site. You have to understand there is an end-to-end journey. And hopefully it actually cycles back into something else. And that's sort of, I guess, the last speaker, Joyce, was talking about our circular economy. The idea to start and look at how can materials of an asset and the purpose and the life of an asset, as it changes over its life cycle, actually be reused and not wasted necessarily.
But interesting comes to Mark's question. So, and it's a really good point it kind of comes to this idea of what is the value, where is it? And what I know now and what I see is the most important thing is who. So I can reduce almost every data set, almost all the time. So I can I do this funny thing where I essentially create a data matrix. So I say, here's a problem. And I say that problem creates a thing, and that creates a bit of data. And that bit of data creates more and more and more and more. And a million email threads and a million Revit files, all saved, all in this cloud. We're all accessing them. And at the end, usually what happens, and I've seen this 99% of the time, is it's always, so who knows it? And it's like, oh, Jim. Okay, so out of this huge data that you've just created, it's usually one number and one person. And usually the number is actually known by the person without even having to have any of that data. It's usually some dude. It's usually a guy who does hammers or drills things. And he goes, oh yeah, you just have to put him over there. That pipe will fit perfectly. And he solves he actually removes $20,000 of effort just by knowing that answer. But we've already spent the $20,000 effort making the data thing to find it. So what I've come down to is it's all about actually identifying the person at the time. And when we look at Mark's question, that's exactly it. Over time, we lose skill because we lose the people and we don't actually record this information. And it's actually recorded, but it's just lost in an oil barrel of mess, basically. And a never-ending integration problem makes it get more lost over time. So to kind of answer its question, they're not actually transferring the skills. We're not saying who's there. So Mr. 60-year-old dude who just lost his job because of automation, he has more knowledge than the digital twin ever will. He can fix a problem right now just by talking to him. Call him up. Hey, mate, what's happening? Fixed. But he gets gone because of automation. And then we've lost the skill over time. And he's the only one who actually knows how the whole thing fits together. And that's even worse because we actually lose a continuum of information. And coming back to that data continuum, this becomes this idea that we keep adding data, but we lose the important pieces throughout it. And so when I look at the digital twin, it's always about, sorry.
So if you're looking at the challenge there isn't necessarily that the automation has taken that man's job. This is, implementation of automation. We've failed to capture the necessary knowledge. So there's actually knowledge management associated with the creation of automation tasks.
Well, yes and no, because this is now how much do we get paid? And this actually comes back to resilience. And this is why, as a small business, I can't do these things. So when I look at automated building approvals and things like that, the digital infrastructure required is so costly that I essentially have to employ someone $200,000 a year, $150,000 a year to manage my data requirements to do those things. This is an impossibility for a sole architect or a sole engineer. In fact, I know in the last couple of years since this pandemic started, dozens of companies, small companies, that have had to really either go under or change their thinking significantly. And most of them are now selling data. They're not selling design anymore. There's not a guy sitting or a girl sitting there essentially doing design. And this really worries me, because what I see an increased push towards automation, standardization, and so forth. But as Mark's questions say, I see a drop in quality. I see less maintenance, less understanding of the buildings, less understanding of the design process to actually achieve, well, what space is supposed to achieve, an increase in an increase in the human condition. Instead, what I see is an increase of space. But where is the design? And so I always come back to that. Where is the design in all this? And to answer that, again, back to Mark's question, I see the design there, for me anyway, is actually the importance of the person, the importance of the activity that happened when something happened. And that's what we're not recording at the moment. So you can basically make a digital twin for nothing. I can make you the most simple, we can do a scan. We can do a scan right now of a building that's just finished. That's enough. And it's going to cost you $5,000, $10,000. What I can do is I can start tagging things, and only things in real time. If things aren't in real time, you get rid of them because, well, it's data. Data becomes irrelevant over time. So what I really am tagging is who and what is making an impact in space. And this actually applies at all levels, from the individual to the organization. So all of a sudden, space starts having meaning. That the most important tenant in that building has the most impact on that building because of the way they use the space. And that could be one specific person, someone in HR in that organization, which actually increases the community of the building. And these are important. So when we talk about space, well-being, all these types of things, this is the key capture. So we're not actually capturing in this whole design process in automated buildings, humans, how we interact and what we do. And it's actually the only thing that matters, I've seen at the end. So make a digital twin, but delete all the data and make it real time and let people access it. What you'll start finding is people solve the problems of buildings themselves as time goes on. It's just inherent. It's just how we work.
So, but I guess the question there then, it's not the people that occupy these buildings, the owners that are going to have control over the ultimate design decision. Because it's not that, the race to the bottom dollar of, around lack of design, if you will, of really getting our buildings in standardized systems is because the cost benefits of actually doing design are diminished. We don't have time. One of the introductions of automation into a lot of these processes is actually to free up more time for engineers to do engineering, for designers to do design, for architects to do more architecture. Like you said, if the way that the actual costs have actually gotten and the needs and demands of the actual requirements that are sort of expected of the market, you don't have time to do what you really want to do. You can't make a system shuffle. You can't make a Sagrada Familia. You can't make a brownstone on New York Avenue. We can't do these anymore because the very demands of what we need to do have been so sort of mixed up with processes and sort of everything has to now become so streamlined so we can free up just enough arm room to go, well, what if we thought differently? What if we made this a little bit more aesthetic? So how do we actually turn that right around on its head? How do we look now? Because on one side, when you talk about resilience, is how do I deliver something at the lowest cost to the client? How do I give the client something that's what they need for what they need today and into the future? But on the other side, we're also saying, I'd like to make something beautiful, or I'd like to try something new. How do we get clients and how do we help them together on that journey collectively start to say, let's do something different? Yes, it's going to cost more money. But if I can automate something and do it 10 times faster, the idea is I don't want to give it to you at 10% the cost. What I want to do is I want to spend 10 times the amount of effort finding the most sustainable solution, or the one that actually is the most aesthetic, or the one that produces the best net outcome of, an industrial process, or, fits the most amount of chairs and tables in a building. Like, we can start to look at now different optimization systems other than just cost, which has been the largest driver to date. And so when we look at, if we pivot and we say not just digital twins, we look at right now we're sitting in an environment where we as a global community, not just in our industry, we're almost blindsided by the impact of what a global pandemic can do that ravages through every country and industry. Now, we know that there's also things coming down the track. If we look at some of the impacts that we're getting in technological developments over the next decade, look at social, political, even environmental, and sort of we look at the UN Sustainability and Development Goals, they're really focusing on a 2030 timeline. We've got significant ecological change and environmental change that's going to happen to the Earth. So how do we now, being where we're at now in 2021, how do we start looking ahead and saying, what do we need to do today to actually embed better design practices, better resilience, so that next time or when the impact of these come, they're lessened to the point that they're not hitting us as hard. So, if an example I was just finishing up today, explaining to someone, flying cars, everyone likes to talk about how flying cars are going to be the next big thing. Now, the reality is we don't know, are they going to hit next year? So companies like eHang say they will. A vast majority say 2024 to 2026, or as far as 2028, we're going to have to start seeing some of these flying around the world, actually at scale. Now, I wouldn't put money on that they're going to come on exact days or exact years, but I know if I'm building an asset, if I'm building a road or a building or something that's going to be next to a helipad or whatever it needs to be, I can bet my life on the fact that that asset is going to last longer, or it's going to be somewhere within the next decade, which might only be 10% of that asset's life. There will be the introduction of a disruptor near it. So how do we walk backwards? And I'll throw it towards a digital twin question, if that helps. How do we now look at the system today and say, what do we need to consider? How do we actually start to build in future readiness and future resilience so that we're not doing the same thing in 10 years' time? We're not sitting there going, well, we knew about this. We knew about SARS version 1, decades ago. And we had a blip.
Been ready.
we like to forget things. So how do we not forget this time? How do we start to say, okay, things have to change as we move forward?
Look, and we're running out of time, so I'll just answer that, and I'll kind of relate it back to resilience as well. So I guess the things for me that are important, what I'm seeing. And so when I look at big business, I'm seeing that they're using a lot of capital, they're essentially holding suit and then looking at the technology which is going to get them there. So things like Zoom, this is obvious. It actually has saved a huge amount of money just in travel costs and so forth. When I look at small business, I actually think it's not that, because we can't survive that long. And that's what I've seen is 2 years, 3 years. How long is this going to go on for small business? We just don't have that capital to keep on going. So resilience for small business in this, and kind of things to really take forward and in moving forward is the specific application of technology. So technology is a bit of a black hole. You can kind of just spend and spend and spend. What I've been kind of telling and talking to a lot of designers about is focus on the skills, focus on the design skills. In a sense, still some of the most important tools that we have as a designer is a pencil and paper. And so I kind of say that's your base technology. That will always be there, no matter what. Use that, and then think about how the application of that with technology, and it's not much, you don't need too many things, kind of can actually expand that basic design thinking. And that's resilience, because the designers of the future are going to have to be resilient with the tools that are there. And it's not going to be just throw money in and data. It's going to be how to be very specific with a very set of limited resources about what technology to use and where. Identifying it, to me, is actually linked to the digital twin. So we can do this through human activity. We know what people are going to do, so we just don't do any of the work before they actually start doing it. So that's kind of my thing. I'll have one final comment as well. I'll say, you know, Marty, and this is related to flying cars. Marty, whatever happens, don't go to 2020. Sorry, it's a Back to the Future reference. Anyway.
That's fantastic. Guys, that was a perfect way to close off our event. And I loved the format and the way that you just bounced off each other and took us through some of those issues. Very well done. Thank you for your time. It reminds